Welcome to Rights for Women, a podcast all about celebrating women's voices and supporting women writers. I'm Pamela Cook, women's fiction author, writing teacher, mentor and podcaster. Before beginning today's chat, I would like to acknowledge and pay my respects to the Dharawal people, the traditional custodians of the land on which this podcast is being recorded. And a quick reminder that there could be strong language and adult concepts discussed in this podcast, so please be aware of this if you have children around. Let's relax on the convo couch and chat to this week's guest. Everyone, welcome to another episode of Rights for Women. It's Tuesday, the 28th of November, as I'm recording this. I cannot believe it is the end of November. Like, where has the year gone? Absolutely mind-blowing. And I'm about to record a chat with Nancy Cunningham, who is part of our Quiet Achievers series. And Nancy has a new book, Crossing the Bridge, her first novel, coming out on the 1st of January with Escape Publishing. So we're going to be chatting about her path to publication and the new novel, which is historical fiction. In terms of what's happening with me, in terms of my writing life, I am very pleased to say, as I reported last week, I have finished the revised version of Out of the Ashes that's waiting to be edited by the publisher. And I was really excited to get that out of the way and to finish the second part of Eve's story, which started in Black Wattle Lake and will continue with a third book coming out next year, yet to be written. And I am currently throwing around some ideas for a novella. Now, I do have a novella out at the moment in the Country Vet Christmas Anthology, published by HQ, alongside Penelope Janu, Alyssa Callan, Stella Quinn and Lily Malone, and that is just going so well. Thank you so much to everybody who has bought a copy of that, who has reviewed it, who has shared it on socials. It's in its second reprint and it's going really well. So that's available, a Country Vet Christmas Anthology. It's a collection of romance and romantic elements stories, with mine being in the latter, and my story in that, A Christmas to Remember, is about a vet, Darcy, who returns to her hometown when her father has a stroke, and she comes back to see him. They've been estranged because she didn't want to take over his veterinary practice and went travelling instead. And at the same time that Darcy returns, a bushfire breaks out. So she is called in to help with some native animals who need care at the local retreat and sanctuary, alongside the carer there, Chad Stewart. So that one's a romantic elements stories. There's also a great family drama and some personal issues that Darcy is dealing with, as there is always in my stories. That's in the Christmas Anthology if you're interested in grabbing a copy of that. As I said, I am working now on the novella for next year, which I have to have into the publisher at the end of January. And I've also got some plans to go back and do a revision on Because You're Mine, and also to write a new book in the Black Wattle Lake series. So I've got a lot coming up in 2024. Some other things that I have coming up in 2024, and one is a writing retreat. It's looking like it is going to be mid-May in Currajong at the foothills of the Blue Mountains, probably. At this stage, I'm just locking in details, but I've had fantastic reception to my initial post about that went out on Instagram and Facebook. Thank you to everybody who responded saying they're interested in coming along. It will be limited numbers, so if there's enough interest, I may even run 2 of those retreats, but I will definitely keep you posted, and keep an eye on my Facebook and Instagram and website for more details in the coming weeks. In other course news, Turn Up the Tension, the last round for 2023 has now finished, and I'm going to be launching another round of that in February. I'm going to do a quick revision on that and just iron out any kinks, although the current round of participants have found it really helpful and have given me some great feedback on the course. So that one will be starting in February. I'll put the link in the show notes. If you'd like to sign up for Turn Up the Tension, you can pay in installments. And it's really my kind of penultimate writing course, putting into that course so many things that I have learned over the years about writing, and have really enjoyed teaching and put a lot of time into creating this course, Turn Up the Tension, which is doing really well and hopefully helping the people who have done it really fine-tune and polish their manuscripts. So watch out for that if you're up for a writing course in early 2024 online. In terms of what's happening with Rights for Women, the podcast, of course, is going to continue next year. I've already got some guest hosts and some interviews lined up for the new year. And if you're a Patreon supporter, I have some new Patreon bonuses that I'm going to start rolling out, but I'll talk about those next week. I'm still fine-tuning those. And Nancy, who we're about to talk to today, is, of course, a Patreon supporter, and I'm really grateful to everybody out there who supports the podcast through Patreon. You can support it for somewhere between $3 and $5 a month. I have been struggling a little bit with getting the bonuses out this year because it's been such a hectic year, but I'm getting back on track with that, and they're going to start rolling out again very soon. So I do appreciate everybody's support for the podcast. And if you do enjoy the podcast, it would be great if you could write a review of any episodes that you really do enjoy wherever you listen, because what that does, it's a bit like Amazon ratings and reviews. It pushes the podcast up the rankings. It gets in front of more people, so more people are likely to see it. And I would love to be able to get Rights for Women out to a bigger audience. So really appreciate anybody out there listening if you can take the time to do a review wherever you do listen. So let's get on today to talking about Nancy. Nancy Cunningham is a writer from Adelaide, South Australia, who has always loved storytelling in all its forms. From writing plays at primary school and original stories at high school, influenced by Abbott and Costello movies and Archie comics, loved those back in the day, to a career in agriculture telling the scientific stories of Australia's rural beating heart, to life-changing personal events that placed her back on the path to a more creative journey, the writer in her blossomed. Novels, short stories, TV, movies, video games, songs and poetry have all inspired her to write stories in genres from historical to romance to crime and science fiction to short literary fiction. But 20th century historical fiction is where her writing heart really lies, especially stories involving stoic heroines of the past overcoming adversity. Nancy lives in the Adelaide suburbs with her tech-savvy partner, always good to have one of those, and real-life hero, her book-obsessed, gorgeous curly-haired daughter, and Molly, the retired greyhound. When not writing fiction, Nancy works as a research science in entomology and has such a fascinating job. I hope we find a little bit about that out in the interview. Nancy's debut, Crossing the Bridge, has been a winner and finalist in several awards, including the prestigious Valerie Parv Award, the West Houston Emmys, and was longlisted for the Romance Writers of Australia Emerald Award in 2020 and the Sapphire in 2021. In 2020, it won the CYA All-Stars Conference Unpublished Adult Manuscript Prize. And it's going to be out on the 1st of January. As I said, it's Nancy's first published full-length novel, but she has been in loads of anthologies with novellas and shorter-length fiction. So it's going to be great to chat to Nancy all about that. Okay. Nancy Cunningham, welcome to the Rights for Women Convo Couch.
Oh, thanks for having me on, Pam. It's been, what is it, long-time listener, first-time caller?
Oh, it's so good to have you on. And Nancy, you are a Patreon supporter of the podcast, which is fabulous. And I really appreciate that, and all the Patreon supporters out there. And it's really lovely to have, I feel, bringing a family member onto the Convo Couch. So it's
wonderful.
Really nice.
Thanks.
Yeah. So congratulations on Crossing the Bridge, which is coming out on the 1st of January.
Yep.
We're going to talk all about that. But before we get on to that, it's been so interesting to watch your kind of career over the last few years, Nancy, because I think we first met maybe back at a RWA conference or an online thing or something a few years ago.
Yeah, I think it was I joined RWA in 2018.
Yeah.
And I remember going to my first conference, and I remember arriving on the first day, and I actually bumped into this lady in the street, and we were talking, and she said, "Oh, you're going to the conference?" I said, "I'm going to the conference." And we got talking about writing and all that sort of stuff. And then we got to the hotel, and we're at the bottom of the stairs, and I looked at her and I said, "You're Valerie Parv." And I had not met Valerie before. And she said, "Yes, I am." And I was just like, I was a little bit gobsmacked, because I was like, oh my gosh, this is the most amazing romance writer in Australia, really.
Yeah.
And she actually wrote about it in her memoir, like how we had met, and we were just two writers talking until the sort of bubble of magic just afterwards, when I found out who she was.
Yeah, I know. Isn't that amazing?
But then I came up to the conference area, and I think you were there with somebody else. I can't remember who. Might have been Lisa Ireland. I'm not sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's so funny when you arrive at one of those conferences, isn't it? Because people are like coming in and you're talking to one person you haven't seen for ages, and then somebody else arrives and another person, and it's just this whole weekend of a gab fest, which is great.
Yes, pretty much.
Always with writers. It's wonderful. But Nancy, what I've loved about watching your career over the last few years is how you've really applied yourself to the kind of both sides of the business, really, the craft side, in terms of continuing to write and get more and more material behind you, to enter contests, to put your work into anthologies. You've also really educated yourself about the business of writing. But I don't know how you first started to be a writer. So could you tell us a little bit about your origin story in terms of where your writing came from originally?
Yeah, sure. I listen to a lot of the podcasts where writers talk about where they started off, and a lot of them say things like, oh, I've been wanting to be a writer since I could hold a pen in my hand, kind of thing. But I didn't start off like that. I think where I started was I just loved storytelling. And from when I was a kid, I loved fairy stories and I loved Enid Blyton and all of that sort of stuff. And then when I was older, it was more movies and TV and music. And then I hit my 20s and it was more music. The more sort of poetic or lyrical the music, the more I loved it, but the storytelling aspect of songs. And then in my 30s, I met my partner and he was really into video games, and he introduced me to the world of storytelling in video games. And then it was in my sort of 40s, probably late 30s, I had a bit of a health crisis, and I was working as a research scientist, but I've always been creative. I always looking for a creative outlook. And then I thought, oh, maybe I could do some writing or whatever. And that's how it started, really. So I met a friend online, actually through playing video games, and she said, oh, you should try National Novel Writing Month and write an original piece of fiction. And I thought, oh, I guess I could give that a try. So I did that. That was 2011, I think.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so it was a while ago, but I didn't really take it seriously at that time. I was half doing stuff, and I did National Novel Writing Month, and I got my 50,000 words at the end, and I'd written a science fiction story, but I actually realised at the end of it, all I had was 50,000 words. I actually didn't know how to write a story at that stage. It was just something completely new for me.
Yeah. I love that you've drawn inspiration from so many different kinds of genres. You were saying about the video games and the music and poetry and books and all those things. So it's really interesting, isn't it, that we can be so inspired by so many different forms of creativity. And then I think this comes up on the podcast quite a bit, that we tend to work takes precedence, or our jobs or our family or just life getting so busy, and we tend to forget about all those creative outlets. It's so great to tap back into them, isn't it? And
That's
to
right.
just really re-energize yourself.
Yeah, so it basically took a bit of a health crisis for me to get through that. So I was diagnosed in my late 30s with multiple sclerosis. And I sat back and I thought, look, I think I need to expand on my sort of creative side as well. And I'm still working as a research scientist and I still love doing that, but I just needed something extra to keep my mind busy and not focused on being ill, kind of thing.
Yeah. Had you had your daughter at that stage, Nancy?
No, see, that was the thing. So I had actually gone through, the other thing was I had actually gone through IVF, and it had been a bit of a turmoil, essentially. And this was a last gasp effort. So that was in 2011. Thought, I can't do this anymore. I have to basically think about my health and stuff like that. But we had one last go, and lo and behold, I fell pregnant. So I was writing my first ever manuscript and having a baby at the same time.
That's amazing. Maybe there's a link between your creative blossoming and your having your daughter.
Yeah. Yeah, it could have been. But,
yeah, no, sorry, go.
I was just going to say, but I didn't really do much. Like I had Jess, and I didn't really do much after that. So until a bit later, yeah.
Yeah, understandably. And you want to be able to enjoy your daughter after having all that trouble too in getting her.
That's right.
So you mentioned, Nancy, National Novel Writing Month. Now, I know from your Instagram posts that you are currently doing Nano, and you have been absolutely blitzing it. How has that been going?
Oh, it's been going really well. I tend to find I work really well in this sort of creative energy, because I wouldn't be able to sustain something like that all year. And it is a really busy time of year, but I think as a consequence of that, you can really focus. You can go, okay, I'm going to do this. I've got all these other things I have to do, but I'll just, for the mornings, for the next 30 days, I'm just going to write. And I do a lot of planning beforehand. So I've got some structure to guide me through the month. And then I just go for it. That's essentially how I've worked in the past. And then at the end of it, I have this incredibly messy first draft. Like, it's terrible. If you looked at it, there's squiggly lines. If you look on Word, there's red lines and green lines everywhere. So, yeah, and lots of mistakes.
That's all right. It's what first drafts are meant to be.
But I just had to get it out of my head.
So you've already hit your 50,000, I think, haven't you?
Yes, yeah. I hit it the other day. I've almost finished the first draft, but I just wanted to, and I think this is the thing with any kind of planning you do. You can plan something, and I plan it out. I go, okay, I'm going to write 35 chapters and 2,000 words roughly per chapter, or try and populate those chapters.
Yeah.
But I got to a certain point and I'd done a few things in the lead up to it, because I write chronologically. I don't jump all over the place. And then I thought, I'm going to have to change this around a little bit. So I've just adjusted maybe the last 3 or 4 chapters to reflect some of the stuff I'd actually written earlier in the month. So it's flexible. The plan's flexible.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to be with the planning. I think there's great merit in planning. And obviously we've talked about this a lot on the podcast. Different people, some people plan, some people don't. But I think that's the key, isn't it? If you're a planner, be flexible. And if something comes up that you hadn't planned for, go with it and see where it takes you.
Yeah, and I think this is where you might start observing things like plot holes and things like that, and you just go, that's not going to work, but I can probably fix it in the second draft. Or you don't have to have anything refined. It's that bigger picture of things. Is it working? Are the beats in the right spot? That sort of thing.
Yeah. Sounds great. Now, Nancy, in the acknowledgements for Crossing the Bridge, you mentioned a couple of mentors that you had. I think Victoria Purnham being one of them.
Yep.
Could you talk a little bit about the role that those mentors have played in developing your writing in your career?
Yeah, it was, like I said, after I did that first novel, which was in 2011, I didn't really do anything until about 2015. And then I thought, I should go back and maybe learn how to write a novel. So I did. They've got an organisation here in South Australia. It's called the Workers' Education Association, the WEA. And I had done lots of courses through them, all creative. Like I'd made a kitchen table and a bookshelf and I did mosaics, and then I did life drawing and all of that sort of stuff. And then I saw that they had a course in how to write your novel. So I did that course and I learnt, oh my gosh, stories have structure. I didn't know that. And that really appealed to me as the scientist in me.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, wow, this actually might be better for me to be able to structure something before I actually put pen to paper. Because the first time I'd written anything, it was just free form, completely free form. And I don't think that worked for me. So that was in 2015. And then in 2017, I wrote another novel, which is the very, very first version of Crossing the Bridge. And I did that a little bit before Nano in 2017 and during Nano. And then towards the end of 2017, I did a course through Writer's Essay called Dynamic Dialogue. And it was run by Victoria Purnham. And Victoria said to me, she goes, what have you written? And I told her what I'd written. She said, you should join the Romance Writers of Australia. And I was just like, okay, all right, I'll give that a go. And so in 2018, I joined. And I think for the first time, I realised how little I actually did know about writing. And I'd actually been looking to people like Victoria Purnham and other authors and thinking, how does this go about? How do I do this? And I definitely needed some sort of mentoring at that stage. But I found RWA and I found the Aspiring group in particular. So they were fantastic to be associated with. Danielle Lyon, who runs that, she's pretty awesome at corralling us into discussion about everything writing. So it's been really good. But I did, with Victoria in particular, I did the manuscript incubator, and that was in 2020 it was. So that's run through Essay Writer. So that's a course where you have a manuscript and then you run through it and you have monthly meetings and then you get access to lots of different courses and things like that. And so I did that for that year. I wrote another novel, which is tucked away somewhere. But at the end of it, there was a group of us who said, oh, we'd really like to continue this, maybe not in the same sort of format. So in the following year and this year as well, we've done this sort of small group mentorship with Victoria, and she's been she's been amazing, like supportive of us going through this process of being aspiring to emerging writers. So it's been a big part of my writing journey.
Oh, that's fantastic. And Victoria is such a great supporter of, as you say, of other writers. And
she is definitely
a real, stalwart in the writing community.
So if anybody gets a chance to do that course, and because Victoria's running it again this year through Writer's Essay.
Is that online, Nancy?
Yeah, I think it's online. It was online for us when we did it, and I think it is as well.
Okay, that's one people can check out. Sounds great. Now, part of your kind of membership of RWA and things that you've been doing over the last few years has been entering competitions in RWA, hasn't it? Tell us a bit about that.
I've been a bit of a competition junkie, I think. So pretty much from the moment I joined, I was encouraged to actually enter competitions, and it has been probably one of the best things for me right at the start to enter these competitions, get an idea, because I really was craving somebody not just pat my back and say, oh, you're doing a great job. I wanted somebody to tell me what I was doing wrong, because you can only improve if someone tells you, oh, it's not done like that. If you do it this way, you might get a better story from it and things like that. So I just went hell bent for leather and just went for it and just did every competition under the sun.
Because they have, so RWA, for anybody that's listening, have lots of competitions where you enter. It could be like a first kiss competition, it's a certain number of words, and you enter a story or a part of a story that includes a first kiss. But they have loads of others too, don't they, Nancy?
Yeah, like Valerie Parv, when she was alive, she ran a mentoring competition as well. So the idea was you entered your first 10,000 words and you got through to the first round, or you were the 6 finalists, and then she would pick somebody from that group of 6 to mentor over the next 12 months. And there's quite a lot of members within RWA who are now published authors who actually went through that process. And I have actually entered twice, I think, yes, and finaled twice. I've entered 3 times, actually. I didn't get anywhere the first time I did it, but yeah.
And the result of some of those competitions that you've entered, of course, has been that you've had your work published.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So what are some of the anthologies that you've been in?
So even like competitions that I entered that I didn't get anywhere, or I didn't final or anything, I had enough feedback to take that story and do something else with. So I met a few people through RWA, so Claire Griffin and Ava January and Sarah Fiddlers. Claire approached me and she said, oh, look, you're writing in the same subgenre that I am. Are you interested in doing an anthology together? And I thought, oh, I've never done this. So that was a bit of fun. I think you interviewed Claire about that process.
I did,
yeah, a few years ago.
I think that was during COVID, maybe. Was that during COVID?
Yeah. That's when our book came out in COVID. But it was a really interesting process. It was lots of fun, and it was so much fun we did it again.
Yes, so you've done 2. So you had the Paris
one, and then the Easter Promises was the first one, and the second one was A Season in Paris. So.
That's right. Yeah, because you will write historical fiction.
Yes.
And it's a great combination of stories in those anthologies. So what do you feel you got out of being part of an anthology like that, Nancy, in terms of maybe what you learned, and then about both sides, the writing and the business side?
Yeah. On the business side, I certainly learned how to do self-publishing, essentially. I was the tech-savvy one in the group, so I was the one who set it up because we had to set it up on, I think we did it through Vellum, and then I had to do it because I've got a PC, I don't have a Mac. I had to go through Mac in the cloud, and I knew how to do all of that, get the files down, and then just twiddle around with it so it looked nice. I loved making covers as well. That's a bit of entertainment for me. So I made not for Easter Promises, but the second one for the Paris one. I made the cover for that.
Oh, did you? It's a lovely cover.
So, and you learn like the process about getting stock images, how to use Canva. I love Canva.
And how to
how to set it up, how to make the jacket and all of that sort of stuff. But the business side of things, the marketing, I'm still getting a hang of. And then on the craft side of things, it was just really great to be able to share stories with friends who were writing in that same genre. Because when I first joined RWA, I had some critique partners, the lovely Kristen Silk and Davina Stone, but they were both writing contemporary at the time. They weren't writing in the same sort of genre as me. But I eventually found Claire and a few others, and they've been fantastic to be able to swap stories with and swap ideas with. When I'm a bit stuck, I go, how can I get over this? And they'll go, maybe you should consider this. Or I'll have one chapter, and I think I'm sending it to Sarah and saying, this chapter's just not working and I don't know what's wrong with it. And she just came back flat out and said, this is what's wrong with it. Go away and think about it.
So, yeah, it's so good, isn't it, to have that those people that will just tell you, because as you say, that's what you want. It's no help to you. Just it's lovely to get feedback like, oh, this is so good, I couldn't put it down or whatever. But you need that feedback of people saying, this would be so much better if you did this, or this isn't working, because otherwise how can you improve it?
That's right. When I didn't start getting any feedback on my writing until I actually joined RWA. Prior to that, I've been in this sort of cone of silence kind of thing, and not having any feedback, or any feedback I had goes, oh, that's pretty good, but it just wasn't enough. I think of it in terms of like my science career as well. When I started out, there were things that I was doing wrong, and I had really good mentors within the science community that I had who said, oh, maybe you should do it like this, maybe you should do it like that. And I was looking for the same thing in the creative writing side, and I think I found it. So quite a few people.
It's probably good that you had that time too, where you were just getting into the writing and finding your voice and working out what it was you liked and what you were into with your writing before you got much feedback, because I do think that sometimes it can be quite crushing getting feedback. And
yes,
if you get it too early, I think that can be a danger of putting your work out there too early, or getting feedback too early in your writing, on your writing path, that you then think, oh no, I'm no good at this, I'm not going to do it anymore. So it might have been good that you had that time.
I started off thinking I didn't know what genre I wanted to write in, and I read pretty widely. I read widely across a lot of different genres, but I thought, oh, I'll write a science fiction novel. And then the second manuscript I wrote, which was in 2015, was a crime novel. So I've got a crime novel in the bottom drawer somewhere. And then in 2017, I was reading a lot of historical fiction, and I thought, oh, I'd really like to write an Australian historical. So I wrote an Australian historical. But I remember when I joined RWA, I think I jumped the gun a bit, and I did actually send my work off to an editor, and that was in 2018. And I was always quite excited about the idea, oh, I'll get to pitch, and I'm going to have this book, and maybe it will get published kind of thing. And I think I was just a little bit too excited about that. And I sent it off to an editor in Australia here, and they came back to me and they said, oh, look, I can't take your money if the book's not ready, essentially. And then she gave me I guess free editing, and it was quite crushing. It was very crushing. It stopped me writing for a couple of months. But I think I needed that. I needed someone to say to me, look, just hold your horses and slow down. It's a journey and you'll get there eventually, kind of thing.
Yeah. And that's the thing, isn't it? It's like anything. There's that kind of old cliche that you have to do 10,000 hours of anything before you even start to be proficient at it. And but I think it's certainly true. And it's especially true, I think, with something like writing, because it takes you so long to find your voice, and it's something that you're continuously working on. But there's, like you say, there's so much to learn. It's not just a matter of having all these ideas in your head and I put them on paper. Then there's all the stuff about plotting and structure and weaving in dialogue and showing emotion. And there's all so much to learn that to expect yourself to do that in a short period of time is just unrealistic, really, I think.
Yeah, it was a very steep learning curve for me. But I remember a guy I work with, and another entomologist, he has a partner, and they live down on Kangaroo Island, and she's an artist. So her name's Janine McIntosh, and she does these incredibly, amazingly large sort of mandalas of found objects. So things like skeletonized leaves, and they've got a property on the edge of the park in Kangaroo Island, and she just uses found objects. But we had this discussion about creativity once, and she said to me, she goes, oh, some people think it just happens like that. She said that 10% of it is me thinking about the idea, but then 90% is me sitting there painstakingly sewing these skeletonized leaves onto these canvases. And they're huge canvases, but they're really stunningly beautiful. But that was her process. She said it's 10% sort of idea, 90% hard work. And I think a lot of people who come to writers and say, oh, I'd love to write a book one day, sort of think that all they have to do is just have the idea, but it's really the labor behind it that actually creates the book.
Yeah, hard work and determination, and determination to stick the distance, really, which is I think really important. So that kind of brings us to now, when you have a book coming out very soon, Nancy, Crossing the Bridge. Now you said that you had a very early version of that back in 2017, I think you said.
So late 2017. I'd written like maybe 40,000 words before Nano. Then I did Nano, got another 50,000. And then in early 2018, I polished it off. By the time I finished, I think I had 145,000 words. But I think there was, like I said, that steep learning curve. I had to learn that a lot of stuff, backstory, a lot of things just had to go. And there was just a few things that were missing, I think, from the book. And I did pitch it at the conference in 2018, and I did get asked to submit, but I got knockbacks for that because I think it was just it just wasn't good enough, really. I don't think it just wasn't enough to sell it to an editor or an agent or anything like that. So I put it away and said, I'll come back to that. And I started working on other things. So that's when I did the novellas and entered short story competitions and did lots of things like that. And it was always in the back of my mind that I would go back to this book. And I think must have been 2019, about 2 years, year and a half later, I went back and I thought, I have to rewrite this. So that's what I did. I started rewriting it, then stopped and did other things, and then came back to it again. And then I think I must have, and then it was just sitting there, that's right. And then I had, which conference was it? I think it was the 2021 conference, which I think was on the Gold Coast. I think it was going to be.
There was one kind of that was just after COVID, and it was a smallish one that some people still couldn't go because I think interstate travel was.
Yeah, I mean, my intention was to go, but then the COVID wave hit again, and so I ended up not going. But I had actually had an opportunity to pitch because it was all online, and I pitched it to HarperCollins, and it was a completely different manuscript. So it wasn't this manuscript, it wasn't Crossing the Bridge.
Oh, wow.
And so they came back to me and they said, the editor came back and she said, look, don't think this is a good fit for us. I went onto your website and I see you have this other book that you've been talking about that's been winning a few competitions. Why don't you send me that? And I was just like, I went into a bit of a panic because I thought, is that ready? Is that ready? And then, so I said to her, so that was in late 2021. And I said, can I send it to you next year? So this was in 2022.
Yeah.
And she said, sure. I said, because I wanted to refine it and work on it. So I think in May the following year I sent it.
Was that historical?
Yeah. So the other manuscript was historical fiction. So I sent Crossing the Bridge to the editor, in 2022, sorry. And I was hoping to catch up with her at the conference. And then when I got to the conference, I found out that she had left HarperCollins. And I was just like, okay, what's the fate of my, submission? Because nobody had said anything to me. I hadn't received any no thanks kind of thing. And I ended up speaking to another editor there, and she said to me, send it to me. So I went, okay, I'll send it to you. So I sent it to her. And I still hadn't heard anything. And then I found out in late November that she had left as well for maternity leave. So I was just like, and still no word on anything. So I ended up contacting one of the senior editors there, and she got back to me pretty much straight away. And she said, don't worry, we're in a bit of turmoil at the moment. We're just going to, don't worry, somebody will read it. So in the new year, I got from the person who heads up Escape, or the editor who does Escape, and she said to me, look, we're actually not looking to publish World War II fiction at the moment, I guess because it's not popular, maybe, not in print anyway. She said, would I be interested in an ebook or like digital version? And I went, of course, anything to, I guess, get my name out there. And yeah, so soon after that, yeah, she came back and she said, I loved it, and taking to acquisitions. And yeah, she came back a week later and said, yep, we would love it. Yeah, so that seemed very quick once that happened.
Quick, but not quick. Yeah, with
Yes.
that history of, and this is a really important thing for people out there who are listening to realize, is that things do change in publishing house. You had that manuscript in there with a number of different editors, but just along the way it fell through the cracks because people were leaving. And so it's not always the case that just that you don't hear, that means they definitely don't want to. Obviously you need to give some time before you do any follow-up.
Yeah.
But following up was a really good idea for you in that case. But I'm curious, what happened to the other manuscript that you said the editor said, oh, the one that was on your website, or was that Crossing the Bridge?
That was Crossing the Bridge. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
right.
So the one I submitted initially was another historical that I had written.
So tell us about Crossing the Bridge. It's historical fiction, romance, and it has, you know, I love that it's got, I'm reading it now actually, and it's got all these different elements of obviously the war story and the war centered here in Australia and the effect that the war had on, particularly on small towns, and also particularly on women, and the way that women were pushed in a way into the limelight. They had to step into the shoes that the men had left, but weren't really given the respect and kudos or any recognition for the things that they were doing, and just the hardships that people went through. It's really an interesting tale, I think. So can you tell us about the book?
It focuses on Poppy, who's a widow, and her husband died. He didn't go to war. He was like a farmer, so he was in a protected industry, so encouraged to stay on the farm. And she grew up quite sheltered in the city, and then she goes out onto the farm and learns how to be a farmer's wife, essentially. But she's quite a timid sort of character, especially during her marriage, essentially. And I would say that her husband was like the man. He made the decisions. He did these sorts of things. Coming out of that, when he dies, she has to find her feet in some way, but not realizing that there's some things that her husband did in the past which is affecting her future and what her future is going to look like. And I guess I would put it in, I would say this is like a rural romance, but set, you know, during World War II, essentially. And that's how I'm describing it to people, is that it's a rural romance. It's a woman trying to save the legacy of her husband's farm and the legacy for their son and her future, essentially. Yeah, but
I thought it was really interesting that the farm passed to the son on the father's death.
Yes. Yeah. So it passes to him, but she's like a caretaker. So she's been overlooked by her husband because he has very set ideas as to what a woman's life should be like, essentially. And that sort of passes through. So in my current novel that I'm writing is a sequel to Crossing the Bridge.
Oh, great.
And so that's the story. So Ronnie is Poppy's sister-in-law, so her husband's sister, and the legacy of what the male line was like in that family, in the Guildford family, is going to affect Ronnie as well, has affected Ronnie, and that's going to be a theme through that as well, through the next story as well. But then
Ronnie's a lot feistier, isn't she?
Yeah, she's very different from Poppy. Poppy's very restrained, whereas Ronnie's just like, no, this is what I'm doing and this is how I'm doing it. And that's very part of her personality, and that was what her brother was like and her father was like, and so she's gotten a bit of that. And initially when I wrote the story, I actually had Ronnie as a point of view, so I had 3 points of view initially, and that was one of the feedback I had from editors saying, just have the two. Do you need the third one? So I thought Ronnie deserves her own story and I'll do that later. So
great. Yes. And of course the hero, if you like, in the story is JB. Tell us a bit about him.
JB, he grew up on a mango farm up in Darwin in Northern Territory, and he's had a bit of a rough life. So he and his sister were living with their aunt and uncle on the family farm because their parents had passed away, and the uncle was abusive, so he wasn't a very nice character, essentially, and so that has affected him. But he goes on to join up and goes to war. But before he had done that, he had fallen in love with a woman, and he wanted to marry her, but he was not seen as good enough for her. but not realizing that he had also, before he went to war, he had made her pregnant. But he hadn't had a chance to marry her. And then you find out, probably not giving too much away, but she dies. But she dies in the Darwin bombing. And so their son, his sister looks after their son, and she takes him to Brisbane when Darwin's evacuated. So and that's where the story for them starts.
Yeah. And I loved all the different threads you've got going on in the story, Nancy. You've got all that kind of war. There's the backdrop of the overseas war, but very much the war as it affected Australia. And then obviously Poppy's situation with trying to hang on to the farm, particularly for her son. There's another mystery surrounding her husband, and then you've also got the romance. So you've got all these different elements, which I think makes the story just really engaging. There were so many different things that I wanted to find out about. It made it a real page turning kind of experience.
Yeah. I've had this real fascination for Australia during wartime, what it was like essentially. And you got what happened up in Darwin, and then you've got Brisbane, and then all the troops coming over, and they went to Brisbane, Sydney, and Melbourne. And then that aspect where Ronnie spends most of the war in Melbourne. And then you've got the aspect of returning soldiers as well. And returning soldiers, not just because they were injured, but a lot of soldiers were demobbed back into Australia to help with labour shortages because it got really bad towards the end of the war. Like JB, he's been injured, but he's not severely injured. He could go back to war, but they've said, no, go and get a job, go and help with labour. So that's his characters when he's come back. He's been injured, but because of the trauma of his childhood, and I guess a bit of war trauma from his injury, he's just thinking, what am I doing? I'm lost. And he's just trying to find peace within himself.
How did you go about, two questions. First of all, like we were just talking about all the backdrop, but did you have to do a lot of research, Nancy? Or was it something that you already had that interest in, so you knew a lot about, and then you had to add to that?
I think I had a little bit of knowledge beforehand, but I'm one of those, I love research and I love looking up stuff. And one of my favourite websites is Trove, which is really old newspapers. So anything that I didn't know about, I would go and look on Trove, and then I would find something else and it would take me somewhere else. It would take me to another story and to another story and to another story. And then there's a lot of papers being written about wartime and the effect of, say, the Americans coming over here. And I have research through my work, I actually have research access to a lot of libraries too. So I can go down a bit of a rabbit hole there if I need to. But yeah, it was just an interest with a little bit of knowledge. And then I just added to it where I needed to in the story. But even then you can get things wrong. So even like very late in the process, you can get things wrong. Like people would say, oh, is this allowed? Did this really happen back in 1944 or whatever? So you go, oh, I'll just go and check. So, and even like little things like towards the end of I won't give too many spoilers, but towards the end where there's like a magistrate and a judge, and I didn't really know the difference. And it was one of the editors at HarperCollins who basically pointed out to me, oh, maybe you should just look that up before we finalise this.
Yeah. It's so easy to kind of, even though you do those rigorous revisions, little details like that are so easy to miss, aren't they?
Definitely,
something that somebody else picks up in an instant, but we haven't got that. You don't have that ability to be objective about your writing. You're so close to it.
I think I had a scene in the book where they go to this little grove, and in the grove I had tulips growing. And I remember very early on, one of my very early critique partners said to me, were there tulips in Australia then? And I thought, oh, I don't know, were they? And then I actually did a bit of research and I found out that there were no tulips in Australia pretty much before, say, 1955, I think.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It was pretty rare.
Yeah.
So I guess I have to take that out.
Yeah, well, that's the thing with historical fiction too, isn't it? There's just the general normal research that you do into things that you don't know about that exist now, but then in historical times it can be so different or non-existent even.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And I think it's really easy to fall into anachronisms, having modern speech where it didn't exist. For example, okay, people saying okay, it wasn't really commonplace until after the war, and that was an American influence essentially. But before that, people didn't really say okay that much.
So how did you find that out?
I think there's like a lot of places. I've actually got this great book. I haven't got it here, it's upstairs, but it's basically Australian slang dating back to World War One. So initially it was focused on World War One, but I do have other books which talk about Australian slang in particular and the etymology of it, like where did it originate, where was it first said. You just have to Google things like when did Australians start first using okay as part of their everyday language. Just little things like that. There's a lot of websites that focus on etymology of any words that you need. You can just go back and have a look and go, is that an anachronism? Am I doing the right thing here?
Yeah.
That's pretty much it. Just a combination of Google and a few books that I've got lying around.
Yeah, love Google. Where would we be without it? Now, you said you're a planner and you do like to plan things out. So I imagine it was the same with this book. And I know the book has been through numerous kind of iterations and has changed a lot from its original version. But when you're planning like that, how do you go about developing your characters? Do you plan a lot about the characters and their backstory and everything first? Or is that something that you find out as you're writing? How does that work for you?
Again, that's something I've probably learned over the last few years, because I just was fairly loose with how I did my characters when I first wrote the book, because I didn't really know what I was doing. But as I've gone on, I've started to focus more on the character development before I actually start writing. So creating GM goals, motivation, conflict for those characters. And I think what was really helpful for me was going through the whole process and trying to find out what their wounds were, what was the lie. I think the one I really loved is, what's the lie that they tell themselves, and how does that resolve at the end, and how does that cause conflict right throughout the book. And I've found One Stop for Writers, which is part of Becca.
Love it.
Yeah, like it's one of my favorite sites now, especially for creating characters, because you can actually sit down and do this whole thing, like saying this is their emotional wound, how's that going to affect their behavior, and what's the lie that they're telling themselves, and what are the behaviors associated with that lie, and how does that affect their interaction with other characters. And it's been really great to actually be able to draw this portrait of a character before you actually write them or write any interactions with any other characters. So I swear by that now. So
yeah, look, I was doing exactly that yesterday for this. I've got to write a novella for next year's anthology, Christmas anthology. No idea where I was starting. So I thought I'll just start with the character, and I went into that character builder on One Stop for Writers. And the thing I love about it too is, even if you don't use exactly what they have there, it makes you think about the character, and it gets you into thinking, oh no, that's what I need to know about her, or that's what's going to happen to her. It just pushes you, and all the different suggestions that they have there. There's so many that you can easily grab one. Like I thought, as I was using it yesterday, I actually thought you could sit here and just pick every wound or every secret or whatever, and just write a story just about that.
And I really like it because it does really, I love dialogue. I love writing dialogue, and I keep thinking you have dialogue between two characters, and I like to try and make them sound as natural as possible. And I'm thinking, you've got a character who's got certain personality traits. Would they really say that in a conversation? And it makes you think about that. Like when you sit back and you're looking at maybe conflict between two characters, and you have one character say something, say, no, she would never say that, or he would never say that, not certainly out loud. They might think it, but they certainly wouldn't say it out loud. And it does make you think about every aspect of that character throughout the book or the story, and how you're going to develop that character over that period. So I think it was Natasha Lester's, one of the first workshops I ever went to through RWA was her plot and story, but she did the whole the triangle arc, and I like to think of characters specifically for that, like that. This is how they're acting now. What's changed here to make them go like this?
Yeah. I think that's so important, thinking about who your character is at the beginning and then who they are at the end.
Yeah.
And then, of course, your story is about how they get to that final place, isn't it? And, of course, all the stuff that you do in preparation for it, if you use One Stop for Writers or character profiles or whatever, and then you learn more about them once you put them on the page too, don't you? They start to take on a life of their own. Yeah.
And I think, like I said, with the early drafts I had, which needed a lot of work, I remember I had some feedback from someone I know who works for Writers SA, And I sent her the first few chapters, and she said to me, she said, Nancy, Poppy is coming across as a bit of a victim. She doesn't seem to have much agency, especially early on in those chapters. You have to give her some agency. Otherwise, her character's not going to carry through. People are going to go, no, I don't want this character. I'm not interested in what happens to this character. So I had to do, I think, a lot of work on her, especially early on, to say, how am I going to make her, like, she's quite a passive character in lots of ways, but I needed to make her interesting, and I needed to give her agency of some sort in order for the story to progress and for people to stay interested.
Yeah, and you do that right from the very beginning, because she's the one, she's picking Ronnie up, and then she's saying, no, Ronnie, we're going here, we've got to do this. She's taking control of her life, because she has to, doesn't she? She's on her own with the son. And so I think you've done that very well.
Oh, thank you.
We've talked about the kind of women's roles and everything, and we've actually talked about, I was going to ask you how it came to be published, but we've done that. So since you got that kind of yes from HQ, it's HQ, isn't it, that's publishing it, Escape Publishing, how has that whole editing process been for you from that point on to the point where it's about to come out?
Well, it was really good, actually. I think I didn't need a developmental edit or a structural edit, because I think I'd been working on it for so many years that it was fairly sound in structure. So the first edit I had was a copy edit, and that was really good. It was really fantastic, actually. The editor through HarperCollins was just laid everything out, and there was nothing that I could disagree with that she had put down. And I think there was only one thing where I said, oh, this was the case, not here. And then once that had passed through, it goes to the proof edit, and the proofers came up with a few other things. Again, it was one of those, yep, I agree. I was very like, yep, I think absolutely wonderful to be able to have that pointed out to me and going, oh, okay, I'll remember that for next time. Just little things like that has been really a good learning experience for me. I have had a few other things edited through external editors, but I think this in particular this is how it's going to be published. This is how we do it, essentially. So it was really straightforward for me. There was nothing complicated at all.
Yeah. And as someone who loves to do cover design,
I
was actually on a not so solitary scribe Zoom call with you, I think, when your cover for Crossing the Bridge came through. And I just remember looking at your face, and you said, I've just got the cover. And it was just like, we're all waiting, we're all holding our breath. And then you were like, oh, yay.
Yeah. Oh, look, when I sent a whole pile of ideas, and because I love Canva, but I resisted the urge to sending them my version of what I think the cover should look like, because it's discouraged, because that can probably interfere with how the designers see it fit in with their other books. And I remember getting it and just thinking, wow, like, that's amazing. And Suzanne, who's my editor, she came back and she said, oh, do you love it? And I think I had heard lots of authors say, this is the cover, I hope you love it as much as we do.
Oh, that's the standard line, yeah.
But it was perfect. I think the only thing that I wanted tweaked was the hair color.
Okay.
So because the hair color in the original picture, the character had quite not dark, but it was darker than the color I had envisaged for Poppy. So they just lined it up and it was perfect. So they did a perfect job, and they added a little quote there from Victoria. So that was really nice.
Oh, brilliant. And that's important, the hair color, because that JB notices her.
Yes.
Notices her, but he actually comments on her hair.
Yes,
so,
he does.
Yeah, good on you. Good on you for pushing through with that. I've had to do that. So, yeah, that character's great, but totally wrong hair color. But isn't it amazing what they can do with Photoshop now? And
oh, definitely. And look, it's really interesting because the stock image that they use for that, I think I've actually seen that model in one of the stock sites that I have a subscription to. And I thought, I've seen that model. I haven't seen that image, but I have seen that model wearing the same clothes but in different poses. And I thought, I'm going to buy those.
Oh, perfect. And of course, just behind you there, Nancy, in your cabinet, we've got there's a picture of Crossing the Bridge. So
yes,
it's great.
Yeah, so because it's digital, I'll take it out.
Let's have a look. You've got the print copy there.
So I got the idea. I went to somebody else's launch and she had done something very similar, published with Escape, but it's just a card. So it's the cover.
Oh, okay. Brilliant.
And then on the back, I've done just the blurb.
That's
and
such a good idea.
Yeah, and then there's a little QR code down the bottom. And then I'll take these to, I'm having a launch in January, a CWA style afternoon tea.
Oh, fantastic.
And Victoria's going to interview me, so that'll be really great. But I can take these cards and I can actually sign them. So instead of actually having the book,
such a good idea.
I can sign the card. So I thought that was a really great idea.
And the QR code takes you to
takes you to HarperCollins. So the HarperCollins website has links to all the places you can buy digital, like if you've got a Kobo or on Amazon or Google Play and Apple Books as well. So
yeah. That's such a great idea. I love that, the idea of the card and the QR. And good on you for having a launch. I was going to ask you about your launch. So that's really exciting.
Yeah, so I hadn't planned on doing it because it's on the 1st of January, of course, and it's the time of year, everyone's on holidays or they've gone away. Like you can't, and 1st of January, nobody's going to come to anything on the 1st of January. I'd lined up with my local library, Paynham Library, and I spoke to them about it. They said, we'd love to host you here. And so they're doing all the marketing for it. And they'll put on tea and coffee, and Victoria's going to come to interview me. And 3 of my friends said, we're going to do all the catering. So the catering is going to be scones and afternoon tea and probably some cake and things like that. So I'm looking forward to it. It'll be lots of fun.
Oh, that's exciting. You got to celebrate. It's such a big event to
definitely
have your first full-length book out there. It's really exciting. Is that on the 1st of Jan, Nancy?
No, that's on the 21st of January, so it's a little bit later, because I just thought, oh, look, I'll avoid it because people will be on holidays.
Yeah.
And nobody will be around, but people will start drifting back to work around about that mid-January time, and I thought that'd be a perfect time to host it before it gets too busy and, before people start going back to school, the kids going back to school.
Are they going to Zoom that at all?
Do you know? I haven't thought about that, but I could probably do that because I have seen people have live streamed their launches and stuff. So I may do that. I just need to do a bit of figuring out first.
Talk to the library, because we've got a library event tonight. Our whole writing group is, I don't know how it's going to go. We're talking at Sutherland Library, so it'll already be over by the time this comes out. But there's 8 of us in the Inkwell, and we're all going to be on stage, and they're calling it Speed Dating with an Author.
Yes, and I saw it advertised. Yeah.
And they're Zooming that. The library organised all that. So maybe.
Oh, I should go down and have a chat to them then. So, But next Thursday, I'm attending my first author event. So Playford Library has an author night market. They've got all authors. It's been organised through Writers Essay, and they're sponsoring the event. So you can just rock up with a few books. You had to have physical books, which is fortunate because I've still got some anthology books that I can sell, but I can also promote Crossing the Bridge as well.
Yeah, you'll have your cards there.
Yeah, I have my cards there.
Yeah, I love that. It's such a great idea. I'm really excited for you, Nancy. It's a great story, and you're a fantastic writer. And I just, I admire the way that you have just worked and worked at your craft. And of course, we continue to do that. But my final question for you is, what do you think is at the heart of your writing?
I think for me, at the heart of my writing, I guess, is the journey for both the characters and myself as a writer. It's not the end point, essentially. It's that all the bits along the way, because I keep thinking about the storytelling aspect again, is that great stories that I've loved, I've revisited in my head so many times, and it's that journey of that story that has resonated with me, and I hope that's come across in Crossing the Bridge and anything else that I write.
Yeah. Oh, no, I love that. And those moments that make the journey up, those memorable moments that you, like you say, you keep going back to in a story and thinking about. I think really
definitely. Definitely. Lie awake at night and I think, oh, what am I going to think about tonight? Oh, I'll think about that. So it's a nice way to drift off to sleep.
Sometimes I drift off to sleep doing that, but sometimes does your brain then get hooked on the story and you think, oh, and then this could happen and then that could happen?
Oh, definitely. I know, like the Nano story that I'm writing now, I was actually sick in hospital when I came up with the idea for this story, and that was a couple of years ago. I had been in hospital, and with MS, if you have an exacerbation, they give you steroids, but they give you a really massive dose of steroids. it's what you become completely wired. You're like, you can't sleep. And so I lay awake on the second night I was in hospital, and I actually dreamed up the whole story that night.
Oh, wow.
So it's been sitting in the back of my brain for 2 years now, thinking, I've got to put this down at some point. I've got to put this down at some point.
Yeah. Oh, that's one advantage, I guess. It's a little silver lining.
Yeah.
To being ill for that moment. But so good that you're getting it out. So what's your plan next? Are you going to revise your Nano, or have you got another novel that you're going back to work on?
Yeah, I've got another novel another manuscript which has done really well in competitions. It did win the Pacific Arts competition and the Romance Writers of New Zealand. And that story, I did a pitch for that through the ASA, and I've been asked for a full manuscript for that. So I just need to polish that a little bit. So that'll be my next project once Nano's finished for the year. Yeah. And then I think maybe February next year, I'll go back to my current Nano story, and start working on a second draft for that. But
yeah, brilliant. You got plenty to keep you busy.
I do, yes.
Thank you so much, Nancy. It's been such a pleasure chatting to you. I'm going to let you get back to your working day, your other working day. And good luck with crossing the bridge. Can't wait for it to get out there and be in readers' hands.
Awesome. Thanks, Pam. Thanks for having me on.